Right, I'm a puppet designer and a puppet maker. My job, the reason I'm drawn to it, I think, is it sort of encompasses many skills and areas of interest. Particularly for me, it sort of suits me. It's a combination of art and theatre, sort of sprinkled with a little bit of maths and physics as well. It sort of in the way that it combines some mechanics and materials, those sorts of things. So it's also good for me because although I'd sort of describe myself as artistic, maybe rather than an artist, but I'm a sort of designer, I'm a maker. It's sort of an applied art, and therefore, you know, you get a brief, you get a show to design puppets for. There are sort of parameters within which you're being creative and allowed to sort of make stuff for theatre. So it's, you know, it's also good for me as I've got a bit of a performance background, and although I'm, you know, less comfortable in front of an audience directly, I've sort of always enjoyed being on stage, and puppeteering allows you to be on stage if you go down that route, you know, with a little bit of a barrier, as it were, to between you and the audience. I was very lucky. I went to Hull University, and there was a really great theatre on the campus, and we had access to that sort of 24/7 as students, and were encouraged to put on our own productions. And so I found myself very quickly in the workshop. I was sort of building sets and getting a very hands-on vocational training, you know, with tools and sort of machinery, and you know, really sort of unlocked something in my in my skill set and my interest. And that led me to sort of become very interested in theatre design and set design. So I sort of started to go down that route, and very soon sort of became the go-to student for people who wanted a sort of a design for their show. I applied to the Slade School of Fine Art and did a 2-year postgraduate. I did a higher diploma in fine art, and studied theatre design there for 2 years. And so at the Slade, I sort of was on a very steep learning curve to sort of get sort of model making under my belt, and technical drawing, and sort of understanding a much more kind of formalized approach to theatre design, where you meet with the director and you have you know, a creative journey to create a response to the theatre piece that you're designing. I did some work for one of my tutors who was actually he was a designer and making an animated film for Channel 4, an adaptation of an Oscar Wilde story, The Happy Prince, and that was my sort of one of my sort of first jobs. I also was lucky because I got 1 or 2 theatre design jobs that just kind of helped me sort of break into the industry a little bit. Often when I say to people I'm a puppet maker, I follow it up kind of very quickly, sort of in sort of stumbling sort of a way, saying, but well, there's the puppets for adult theatre sort of thing, grown up on stage, big puppet, you know, not lit, stuff like that, and try to explain to people. And I think it's very difficult if people haven't seen. So I'm probably going to disappear out of shot, but if I do, well, I'll try and just angle up a little bit. This is the sort of puppet that I started out making, and just to sort of describe it, he's probably about sort of 3 feet, 2.5 to 3 feet tall, and these are inspired by Japanese puppets, bunraku puppets. So they aren't Bunraku puppets, but they're created as a sort of a contemporary Western response to them. They are controlled usually by 3 people, so you'd have a person on the head and a hand and a person on the back. And I started off really really interested in these human, sort of small human puppets, and made lots and lots of these. I mean, gradually things have changed, and I now find myself making a lot of animals and things like that. So this, for example, this is a goat puppet. This is a one-person puppet for an adaptation of The Life of Pi. And it's all styled to look like pieces of driftwood. I mean, this is wonderfully light. It's made of a material called plastizote, and this brings me back to my sort of interest in materials and that I mentioned earlier on. We use plastizote a lot in what we do. It's a very lightweight puppet making material, and you can use it in many ways. So, in terms of the skills involved in what I do, there's a lot of different. You sort of have to have a whole range of skills. Ideally, building up your contacts in terms of the people that you might want to work with in the future, and identifying whose work you like, who is doing the sort of theatre, making the sort of theatre that you want to be involved with, and then finding out sort of who's behind that and how you can kind of get involved with what they're doing, either to be inspired by it or to try to work alongside it. But when you're starting out, you're doing all of those things in a smaller way. You might be given a commission and say, someone come along and say, well, look, I've got 1,500 quid, I need this for a show, and you've probably just got to say yes, take the opportunity, and then figure out how to do it. And you probably won't earn a lot in your first jobs, because you'll be making mistakes and you'll be learning. There are sort of few formal training grounds for puppetry. So a lot of people that come to us, and I do have sort of people who come and intern with us, for example, or do work experience as part of their courses. And we have to really help them along the way. Which sort of bring me back to that. This is the same sort of material as the goat was made of, but it's used in a very different way. This is pattern cut and assembled, so it's a sheet version of the material, and draws on sort of skills of pattern making and pattern cutting that you might find in a slightly simpler way in costume making or dress making, something like that. So it's as opposed to the sculpting skills that you would need for doing the head of the boy that I showed you earlier, which is much more about sort of creating sculpting in an additive way with clay. So I use a software package called Fusion, which is a really amazing piece of software, and it is fantastic. It's sort of geared more towards product design, but puppets and things fall very well into its setup, and I'll draw out the puppets in CAD, and I can sort of create mechanisms in there to try and see if they're going to function well, and sort of refine those, and then we can take those drawings directly to the workshop and output them into another piece of software which cuts out stuff on the CNC machine that we've got. So there's a whole kind of new automated process or processes that. And you can see in the background we've got a 3D printer as well. So sort of we're using it's not so good for show puppets, which need to be a little bit stronger than that we can achieve with that. But it you know, it has its uses, and occasionally we'll print out something and then mold and cast it. I think you've got to sort of take every opportunity you can, write to people, and pester them to sort of be useful. The people that I respond to are those who come with enthusiasm and sort of no assumptions about what they can offer or what they're going to take away. They come with a very open mind and just want to be around makers and in a creative environment. And I think if you can open yourself to that and sort of spot those opportunities, you know, you may start off thinking you want to be a puppet maker and find yourself doing something else, or vice versa. But certainly I think you'll have the best journey if you go with that approach. Well, actually, I can pass on a piece of advice. Actually, that my tutor at art school said to me, and it was when I returned from France, having done this course with Philippe Gentil, and I made a puppet when I got back. And I took this puppet in, and quite nervously he asked me if I'd do a small talk to the rest of the students about my experience, and so I did this, and everyone was very, you know, friendly and gracious about it. And at the end of the talk, he said to me, you know, this is really good, you know, you've got to pursue this. He said, you've got to get a gimmick. And he meant it sort of, you know, crassly, but sort of very seriously. If you can find something that just sort of helps you to stand out, and I think for me it was the puppets and the puppetry, in a world of theatre which is, you know, highly competitive in many ways. If you can just identify one thing that you're good at and maybe push that, well, you know, who knows what that will grow into.